Backyard Farmer is a co-production of NET Television and Nebraska Extension. Tonight on Backyard Farmer, we'll help you with fruit tree pruning and taking soil samples from your planting beds and turf. That's all coming up next, right here on Backyard Farmer.
Hello and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd and I'll be your host for the next hour of answering your gardening questions. Joining me on the panel tonight, we have experts from Nebraska Extension. We have Fred Baxendale answering all those insect questions.
Good evening, Kim.
Turf and weed questions, Bill Kreuzer.
Hey, everybody.
Amy Timmerman down from O'Neill, all those rots and spots questions.
Hi, Kim.
And critter creature, Dennis Ferraro, is going to answer our horticulture questions.
Great to be here, Kim.
We'd love to hear your questions as well. If you need help with a garden problem, you can just give our volunteer phone panel a call at 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 1-800-676-5446. If your question can wait or you want to send us a photo, you can attach that to an email, byf@unl.edu. Tell us where you live, give us as much information as you can, especially the part of the state. Remember, Backyard Farmer is also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for your weekly gardening announcements and your program content. So always we start with samples, Fred. My goodness.
Aren't these fun?
Well, yeah.
I think that most of our viewers will recognize these as bagworm cases, right? And they overwinter within these cases. And again, they can be a very serious problem on everything from spruce to juniper in this case. Smells kind of nice. So the key to controlling them is if you just have a few on your trees is to actually pick them off right now, because in fact they do overwinter as eggs within the last year's bags. All right, and I just brought one that I cut open, and you can't open it with my hand, so I just want to show viewers. So here's what they look like inside. You can see this is this will be the female. If I open this up, we can see, ooh, it's full. They're full of eggs.
Wow.
And we can see all the eggs. So again, what we want to do is we want to pick these off now and eliminate the eggs, and it will greatly diminish the number of bagworms that we have this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. What a mess.
What a mess. Did I do this?
Okay, Bill, your turn.
All right. So I brought in today a different product than our traditional weed and feed fertilizer you might be going down this time of year. People are trying to get out with a pre-emergence application of herbicide to prevent crabgrass and other weeds this summer. But really, we don't need the fertilizer part of that weed and feed right now. We just need the weed control part, that pre-emergent product. And so you can find these type of products at our garden centers. Maybe not a big box store where it's just the pre-emergence herbicide. And so if you have traditionally problems with annual weeds and crabgrass, for example, going out with the pre-emergent herbicide shortly is the way to go. And avoid putting that fertilizer down this time of year, because the grass is green, it's growing, so we don't want to mow more than we have to. And so let's try to just put down what we need, and that's just going to be just the pre-emergence herbicide, not the fertilizer.
Sounds a little touch the earth lightly.
Yeah,
there you
exactly.
Go. All right, Amy, speaking of nasties.
We got nasties today. The wonderful rain, mist, fog, whatever you want to call it, that we've received the last 2 days has really set off our cedar apple rascals from really starting off. And so I picked these off of my favorite cedar tree here on campus today, and we got several different stages. A lot of times right now what we're going to see is the brown little galls and these little tendrils coming out here. They're fairly short. When they're dry, they're actually kind of pokey. But as we get more moisture, more rain, they actually elongate. I'll flip over here, Dan. And we get more alien-like. You see how gelatinous they get, and these will continue to grow out. It's at this point when they're gelatinous, that's when they're releasing the spores that are now going to fly over to our apple species, our crab apples, edible apples. So this is the time of year we need to look at spraying. If your apples are starting to leaf out, like I'm seeing a lot in the Lincoln area, you definitely want to get those applications on. For me up in O'Neill, the apples aren't leafing out yet. It's still probably a week or two before we get full leaf set. So if we get these going on, the tendrils, we're going to wait a week or two until we actually have leaves on the tree to actually spray. How many times do we spray? Usually one spray is going to be good, but if we have a really wet spring and we continue to have this misty, foggy weather, you may have to come back with 2 or 3 applications to protect your trees from the cedar apple rust.
And you're talking spraying the apples, not the cedars, right?
Right, you spray the apples, not the cedar trees. Sorry. Thank you
Gotcha.
for the clarification.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, Dennis, bring him out.
Oh, it's spring is sprung. And so, the birdies may be around, but so are the snakes. So garter snakes came out a couple weeks ago, and the first thing they do when they come out is that one female will attract probably every male within 30 yards, and they have what's called an aggregation ball. And I've been getting a lot of calls, people seeing these and being very disturbed. These are our 2 species of garter snakes, so these cannot interbreed. It's not by color, it's by scale count that I know they're 2 different species. And they're common, and we've done a lot of work looking for Salmonella, Giardia by swabbing their mouth and their body, swabbing over 500 snakes in the state. And out in the wild, they're not carrying anything. That's transmittable to us. They carry no fleas or ticks transmittable to us, so they're pretty benign. And they eat earthworms and some insects. So they're not causing a problem. They don't dig holes. They use holes that are already there. And so it's just one of those things, if for some reason you have that fear called ophidiophobia, chemicals don't repel them. And you can't use any chemical toxins, or there isn't any of that work either. So what we did find is sharp lava rock, which is not good for landscaping, but packed in next to the foundation, 6 inches deep by 1 foot wide. They can burrow in it, and they don't like to run or slither on that sharp lava rock. So that's a natural way you can discourage them from being close to the foundation.
Excellent.
But in the yard, it's great. You want a drink?
Yeah, that one wanted to wrap his tail around your coffee cup.
It's getting
I
a
want to
drink.
say this one looks like he's posing
is,
for the
yeah,
camera.
getting a
A drink.
Of
Want
coffee.
another drink?
No water.
Cool.
All right, and on that note, Fred, we're not sure where this viewer is from, but she sent us a couple of images of what she's calling gnats. Tons and tons and tons. The one that had tons of them was not very clear, but this particular little guy was. And what are they and what do you do?
And I think it said that they were all over the house. They were invading.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
Interesting. That's a hackberry psyllid. All right. And it looks like a miniature cicada because it's fairly closely related to the cicadas. Now in this picture, it looks like it's about 4 inches long. Actually, they're just about about 1/8 of an inch. So it's a tiny little insect that can easily move through window screens. And again, this is the insect that causes those galls on the undersides of hackberry leaves. See those what we call nipple galls, these little galls. And this is the insect that actually causes it. It's the larvae that are, the nymph that's actually causing the gall. Okay, so what's happening is, it turns out these overwinter as adults. And so in the fall, as they're looking for overwintering shelters, they come to the house. And if we have hackberry trees around, there can be, millions of them, or hundreds of thousands at least. Okay, and because they're so small, they can easily pass through the window screens. And so they come into the house. They go under the shutters, or under the shingles, and all over the place. Okay, and now in the spring, and that's where they overwinter. In the spring, they need to get back out. Well, it's sort of like a minnow trap. Those that are in the house can't get back out, so they start buzzing around and being a nuisance. And there are many, many thousands of them sometimes. So, again, inside the house, you could use something like one of the aerosol insecticides if you wanted to. They're going to die fairly quickly. Just figure out a way, vacuum them up, and get rid of them that way.
Cover your coffee cup.
Yeah, outside you could use some sort of, if there's enough of them on the side of the house, you could use a spray, but generally there aren't that many.
All right.
Hackberry psyllid.
Psyllid with a P.
P-S-Y-L-L-I-D, and if the family would be A-E, psyllidae.
All right,
I'm
Bill.
not spelling anything from my end.
Turf, T-E-R-F.
TERF.
Okay, this is a viewer from Kearney,
Okay.
and she sent a couple of pictures of not turf. It's an old bluegrass lawn that she said is healthy. It's become bald all the way down to the soil at 2.5 feet over the winter, and so now there's some other patches missing a long ways away. She says they do manage their turf properly with professionals, and they have a sprinkler system.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell by those pictures because it is pretty, thin turf, and there are some signs though of shade, and I know that can be a big issue, especially last fall. If you have a maple tree, for example, keeps its leaves on really long, and it shades that turf out, and so then that leads to that grass thinning out, and if it's over fertilized, it actually it's more susceptible to shade and it will thin out because a lot of energy is spent on leaves, and there's not enough sunlight there to sustain that growth. And so if you do have a shade issue, you want to try to reseed those areas with a tall fescue that's going to be more shade tolerant than the bluegrass is going to be. You want to try to back down your fertility rates once it's established so it's not too lush and growing too vigorously. And then do any kind of pruning to try to get a little bit more light on that tree as possible. But just roughly based on that picture, I think it looks like a shade issue and a fall shade issue.
Yeah.
It's pretty common.
And maybe drought because the tree is going to take
Yeah,
what it needs.
exactly. And we did have a lot of winter kill on golf courses around the Kearney area, and so that may be an issue too with the drought on the tree.
Good. Thanks, Bill. All right, Amy, it's great to know this viewer from Lincoln is watching the show. And last week we had pines with needles turning brown. He thinks he has a similar problem. These trees are about 10 years old at the top of his pond. Last year, one turned brown, and by fall, it was almost completely. Now the other one is following the same path. Are we talking a pine disease, or are we talking winter injury?
We're actually looking at winter injury. We're looking at winter desiccation. And I think the next picture you're gonna be able to see a little bit better if we look at the needles. There it is. You see how the needles are browning from the tip, working its back down to the base. And that's a real good indicator that it's water issue, because that's the last place it's gonna get water. And on the first picture, you saw the tree that's on top of the pond is the one that was shown the worst. And this would be an area when we're looking at a berm type situation that we don't always get enough water on top of the berm or on top of the pond here. And so the water is running off and the tree isn't getting an opportunity to absorb the water. So the big thing with our pines, this winter was very dry. The hoses need to be out. We need to be watering our evergreens right now. Even though we're getting some misty weather right now, it's not enough water to sustain those trees. So you're gonna put the hose on, slow trickle, and soak them really good. And it will help them revive back out. Now, the needles that have turned brown, will they turn green again? No. What is brown, but you can encourage new growth, and as the tree continues to grow and mature, we can actually hide some of those components and then prune it out accordingly. But definitely get the water on those plants right now. That's gonna be your saving grace at this point in time.
All right, thanks, Amy. Okay, Dennis, you get the most fun question.
Do I? Great.
This is somebody who they're in Hastings.
Okay.
They have a rabbit that is attempting to move the downspout,
Yeah.
and apparently has been doing this for a couple of weeks, couple times a
Not
day.
just over Easter.
Nope.
Because it looks a little bit like the Easter bunny
He
in
does.
disguise,
Yep.
and I think he's hiding eggs.
Probably. But he yanks the pipe and then either straightens it back or he yanks it the other direction. And then he goes all the way into the downspout and then he comes back out. And they think last year they had two twin bunnies were kind of out by the drain pipes, and then they went on their own, wondering if this is one that's decided the drain pipe is the cat's meow in terms of places to live.
Well, yeah. I don't know what the cat's meow is, but behaviorally, I think they're trying to get water. What might be happening is that you get when it's dry times like we've been having, over condensation on the roof puts a little bit of moisture down into those downspouts, so you get a little bit of moisture. And they'll try to pull it because they know if they pull it one way or another, a little bit of water will run down. So just going by the behavior of a rabbit, what are the limiting resources and what could they get by doing that, I think it may be for moisture or water.
Interesting. We'll see if he lasts and has
Yeah.
A little pile of rabbits in there.
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't give birth in there. They
You
cook real quick.
And on that note, so growing your own fruit in your own backyard is really a great way to get fresh peaches, apples, plums, maybe even cherries on your table. But getting those trees to fruit correctly can be a really complicated matter of trying to manage disease, manage insects, manage that poor weather. Making good pruning cuts early in the tree's life can also make a difference in your production. So for our first feature, we're going to talk about pruning fruit trees. There's a huge interest in growing your own fruit at home, and fortunately there are a lot of fruit trees available either in local nurseries or by mail order. First thing to figure out, of course, is what kind of fruit tree you want. Are they apples, peaches, pears, plums, cherries? All of those interesting fruits that taste so good on the plate. Second thing to do is make sure you get those trees from a reliable source and then look for the best quality tree you can. Locally, typically trees are available in a container. They may have come into the nursery a year before and been pruned properly and then potted up, which makes it a little bit easier for the homeowner to actually deal with them. A couple of things to look at, obviously, in choosing a good tree, always the root system. Make sure you have good, healthy roots that are not circling. But then we start looking at the top of the tree. We want to take a look first at this peach, which really has kind of an odd shape and form. A couple of things going on. It has a really crooked trunk. That is likely not to grow out of that. It also has a piece of a dead leader in it right here, which will need to be pruned off. It has been pruned sort of into a good canopy and a good shape, but in comparison to some of the other trees that are a little bit more uniform, this would probably not be my first choice of tree. If you look at the trees behind me, you can also see that we have trees that are already in flower. That's very typical for peaches, apricots, cherries to break bud quite early. And so if you think about why we prune once we have selected a good tree with a nice structural form, we prune first to remove dead and dying, which is typical for any tree that we're going to prune in the landscape. We then prune to open up the interior of the plant because it's really important for fruiting trees to be able to get sunlight into the interior of the canopy. We then prune for structure, and that also is one of the things that can really be confusing to a homeowner because we prune different types of trees differently for their fruiting capability. So what we also want to do once we've selected a tree or as we're selecting it is look at whether the original pruning has been done properly. What we're usually after, depending on the species, is either a strong central leader, which would be true of apples, or a wide set of scaffold branches that are whorled around the trunk of the tree. Again, we're after good spacing for good fruit production. We want to make sure that we have selected properly to begin with, and then we will prune over the lifetime of that plant to make sure that we are actually introducing sunlight, keeping the spacing wide enough for good air circulation, which also helps with pests and diseases, and allows us to get to that fruit so we can take that first luscious bite of that peach in the spring. Good pruning cuts are really important to produce good fruit, and making those right cuts now is going to pay off over the life of the plant. And if the plant gets taller than you are, chainsaw, right? Okay, Fred, speaking of fruit, this is not you.
Thanks, Kim.
Sorry. This is a viewer in Falls City who has an old Bartlett pear, and you can see what's going on in there. And they know it's got some rot and it's pretty ancient, but they also they're seeing all this sawdust going on, and they're wondering if should they be concerned about whatever is doing the sawdust heading off into the rest of the landscape?
There's a lot going on in that tree.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see some bore holes going into it. I mean, I think that this tree has some serious issues. Mm-hmm. The sawdust is almost certainly ants. Maybe carpenter ants. You know, they would seek out that kind of environment. Mm-hmm. So, I think at least those two issues, and clearly there's some rot going on, some trunk rot.
Right.
So you have these three big issues. So, if to control the ants, you could just use a topical spray. Directing it into there would probably control something like bifenthrin or 7 or permethrin should work pretty well. The borers, again, you could go to a borer spray, but I'd like to see that tree up close. But I think maybe it's time to take that one out and put a new plant into the landscape. Bartlett pears just don't last that long
Right.
under Nebraska conditions.
Right, and it's almost Arbor Day.
And it is.
There you go.
What a great opportunity.
All right, Bill. So your second picture is the Twitter question of the week.
Okay.
And there it is. And the question was, on this particular one, wild violets are taking over the beds around their house and lawn. They've pulled, dug, sprayed. How do they get rid of them? And here's our Twitter answer, which is at Orvin Bontrager. Treat the violets with a lawn product containing triclopyr herbicide. So you get to expound on how in the world, as the expert, do you manage wild violets in a lawn?
Yeah, triclopyr is actually a product that will work. The spelling there, I think, was questionable, but I can't spell either. And ultimately, we can continue to spray, continue to try to pull those weeds out, but it comes back down to management. And are we trying to manage plants that really shouldn't be growing in that condition? Is it really shady? And if it is, let's go with maybe a shade-loving ground cover to cover that soil and compete with those weeds, because we can just fight this and fight this and fight this, but if we're not managing the area properly with plants that are suited to that area, we're constantly going to be pulling our hair out. So it really comes down to just planting the right plant in the right location.
Excellent, and enjoy them.
And enjoy them, yeah.
There you go. All right, Amy. Not sure where this viewer is from, but they have a Norway spruce, and they have pulled this giant thing off the base of the trunk, and he wonders if he should have pulled it off.
Okay.
What is that?
This is a conch fungus of some sort. I can't tell you which one it is. What this is the fruiting body of the fungus, and the fungus is actually in the inside of your trunk. It's eating away at the heartwood. And so once it gets to eating too much, it decides it's time to reproduce. And so it produces this conch on the outside. What it's indicating is that the integrity of your tree is very, very poor, especially if it was at the base of the tree. So that means your main whole structure of that was a spruce, right, Kim?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's probably not in very good shape. So if we get a heavy wind event this spring or this summer, it'd be very easy for that tree to break in half and potentially fall onto something, and then you would have a mess. So the one way, if you really want to know if you're having major tree integrity issues, is you're going to take a long drill, electric drill bit, and you drill into that trunk. And if it's a good solid trunk, it's going to have resistance all the way through there. When we run into hollow heart, fungal infection in there, as we get to that hollow part, that drill bit's just going to go zip right through, and it's going to give you an indication of how much room that you have in the diameter of the tree. Yes, you open it up to insect borers and other diseases, but at that point in time, you already have it in the tree, and it's giving you an indication of, do I think a tree can last another year, or do I need to consider taking it out, because there isn't much holding it there anymore, and it's a real big liability and something to be concerned about.
All right,
What
thanks, Amy.
diameter bit?
Doesn't have to be very big.
Right, so not like 2 inches.
Not 2 inches. The trick is getting one long enough. That's probably the biggest problem everybody's had, because you can't go with like a 2-inch bit. You need to go with like a 12-inch bit.
Okay, Dennis, you get the next picture, and this is the number of questions related to that picture, which is like 12. What is that, and how do you control it, and how do you differentiate between that and what it's not?
That's a meadow vole. And so what they do is they eat the grass down to the crown, and they do it under the snow cover, and they also do it where the grass is actively growing, and they cause open holes, not covered holes, and they don't upheave the soil like a mole, M-O-L-E. So vole, V-O-L-E, are these little creatures, and they're granivores, and they eat a lot of seed material. And they can also girdle the very bottom of a tree, especially if you have a lot of mulch around it too high over the winter, because they live in that mulch, and then they utilize the moisture and the cambium and the nutrients to make it through the winter. Right now, they love to eat bulbs, and they'll even eat carrots and other things like that.
Hostas. They love hostas.
Yeah. Not as much as deer, though. But unlike moles, who would only eat insects and earthworms. So voles eat your plants, moles eat the earthworms and the insects.
Excellent. Thank you, Dennis. Well, we showed you earlier how important good pruning can be for your fruit trees. For our green and growing tip of the week, Extension educator Jonathan Larson helps us keep those insects from harming our fruit trees by telling us about dormant oil sprays.
As it starts to warm up here in the springtime, you're going to start worrying about those pesky pests that attack your backyard fruit trees. So I'm here today to talk to you about some stuff that's going to help you to control those pests before the buds break on your tree. We're going to talk about dormant oils. These are refined petroleum products that you put on the tree before bud break. If you wait until after that, you could cause some phytotoxicity problems. You could burn the leaves of your tree. You're going to put these products on there on a thick and nice and even coat throughout the tree. And if you do this, you're going to be able to control pests like European red mite, European fruit licanium, as well as San Jose scale. All of those different things that overwinter in your tree. You get this thick oil down into the bark and the limbs of the tree. It will suffocate the insects as well as get inside of them and destroy them internally. So a very important product to apply before the spring is sprung. And if you do that, you're going to be able to suppress these pests and save yourself a lot of time, money, and heartache in the future.
Hopefully you've learned a few tips about getting those fruit trees off to the right start this spring. Taking care of these issues now will help your trees through the spring and summer by keeping those insects off. And I know that's one of the things that's really important if you don't want a little protein with your apple. Okay, Fred, this is an Omaha viewer that has a maple 4-inch caliper. Apparently the landscape company said the tree has scale, and he wonders if he can treat the scale on a small maple himself, or does he need a professional?
No, on a small maple, you can probably do it with a hose end sprayer. Again, the secret is looking for the crawlers. So remember, the scale insects reproduce by producing these crawlers. So you go out with a piece of paper, and this will be probably mid-May, and you tap that out, and when you see the little yellow crawlers, that's the time to treat. Don't do it before, because you won't affect the parent scales. So
excellent. Thank
mid-May.
you. All right. Bill, we don't know where this viewer is from either, but apparently it's a husband-wife war over whether the pre-emergent or crabgrass preventative should go on now since the temps have been so warm.
We look at soil temperatures, and we are just now getting into where it's okay to put down a pre-emergent product, but we can wait a couple more weeks and still get really good control. And so you can put it down now, and you can put it down in a couple of weeks, and it still will work just fine.
All right, excellent. Amy, we have a viewer in Valparaiso that says their daylilies came up kind of a yellowish, and the leaves are continuing to turn that color. Does that sound like any daylily diseases that you're familiar with this year?
There's actually a crown rot of daylily. So we're not getting enough water and nutrient movement. And that yelling to me indicates maybe a nutrient deficiency. So making sure that it's well drained and it has been watered. We have a lot of crown rots that actually move in when it's too dry. So you want to make sure it is wet. And if you have a couple daylilies that look really bad, you may just want to dig them up and then just split them open and see if that crown is nice and white like it should be or not.
Excellent. Thanks, Amy. All right, Dennis. This viewer has many raccoons that poop in their yard and keep messing with the pump in the pond and wonders if there are products that repel raccoons other than lead.
Well, you can't use lead anymore, but
exactly.
Steel works. There is no repellents that work on raccoons. They're too smart to be deterred by any odor, sight, effigy type thing. So it's going to be trapping. If you're in city limits or an area where you can't, take them with a shotgun, which is legal. If there are vermin on your own property, you can get a license from Game and Parks to take them also as a fur bearer. But you can also trap them, and trapping them is fairly easy. And it takes a little while to get most of them, but they trap fairly easy. If you're going to trap them in a box trap, the best thing to use, especially if you're near an urbanized area, is marshmallows, and hook them from the top, hanging over the threadle, not where they can grab them with their paws without going in. And that way you won't get the neighborhood cats if you use marshmallows.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Well, let's take a minute to head over to our garden to see what fun activities were going on this week. Nebraska Extension Horticulture Assistant Terry James tells us not much is going on yet outside, but things are really heating up in the greenhouse.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're looking forward to maybe some rain coming in through the area through the week. However, we spent some time in the greenhouse and we looked at all of our seed packets to see what else we could get started indoors. If you look at your seed packet, you need to count back how many days it is from germination to the time you actually want to put it out. When you're looking at warm season crops like tomatoes and peppers, you kind of want to look at the calendar date kind of mid-May, end of May. So you take those dates and you count back. That's what we did this past Saturday in our Backyard Farmer greenhouse garden area. The master gardeners took some seed packets, they looked at the dates that were going to germinate, and we decided we were going to add a few more warm season crops. There's a couple bunny tail grasses that we put out, and we actually planted a little bit of basil also for our herb garden. That's what's happening in the Backyard Farmer Garden this week.
It's time for a short break. Coming up on our show, we'll have Gladys's Plant of the Week and the lightning round. Stay tuned for more Backyard Farmer right after these messages. Welcome back to Backyard Farmer. Later on in the show, we'll hear from Bill about why taking a soil sample is so important. You can still phone in your questions by dialing 1-800-676-5446. While you're doing that, we'll start the lightning round. You are on first, Dennis.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm always ready.
So this viewer wants to save a little money and get rid of various chewing creatures with a concoction of rotten eggs and cayenne pepper. Does that work?
Probably not. Most of the animals in most areas, that would not do anything to them.
All right. Which frog is peeping right now?
Right now is the chorus frog, Pseudacarus maculata, and they're in full chorus right now.
And are those frogs native or introduced?
They are very native.
Excellent. So along the line of getting things in and out, does liquid fence work to keep anything out of where you don't want it?
Which is a repellent. Most repellents have less than 25% reduction in animals crossing those points.
Okay.
Liquid repellents.
So if a person has a skunk in their neighborhood, how do you keep them out?
Well, you trap them. You have to trap and remove them.
Oh boy. Okay, are bullfrogs invasive?
Yes, they are. They're only invasive species of herp.
Is there any way to keep a hawk away from habitat and attacking birds at bird feeders?
It'd be very, very difficult and probably would be illegal because the hawk has
Excellent.
more protection than the songbirds.
Excellent. Nice job.
Thank
You ready, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. I forgot to ask Lauren one day and he was mad. So, all right. So this particular viewer wonders if it is possible to spray for verticillium wilt in various species of plants.
No, you cannot spray for verticillium wilt. It is automatically in the soil.
And they've seen these big things that they think are black knot in plum thickets and in ornamental plums. How is that spread? Is that something that's...
And those black masses are actually going to produce the spores, excuse me, this late spring, early summer, and they're wind blown, and they release those spores for a long period of time. So it's really hard to actually spray for that disease because of the long inoculation time.
All right. Is it species specific or is it?
It's not species specific. It goes to all prunus. So wild plums, native plums, or domesticated plums. It moves back and forth very easily.
All right. This viewer did not get their grasses that had rust cleaned up this year. Is it too late to keep that from doing anything?
Your rust on your grass, not a problem whatsoever. Actually, that rust is actually blown in from Texas every single year. It doesn't survive here. So you're perfectly fine, and you can blame it all on Texas when we have a problem.
It's fun to blame things on Texas, actually, sometimes. Okay, are you ready, Bill?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so we have people wanting to seed, and they're wondering, is it really necessary to cover new seed?
We like to cover with a little bit of straw, and it just to help hold the moisture in, because we can't water as frequently as we need to keep that seed to germinate. But you don't need very much, just a little bit of straw, don't have to cover the whole surface.
Okay, so how about that green stuff that looks like newspaper?
Yeah, so it's called, sometimes it's called pen mulch or something like that, and it definitely can work. Again, just don't put it on too thick. 50% of the surface or less needs to be covered. You want that sun to warm the soil up.
And then do you rake it off?
You don't have to rake it off. It generally would just start to decompose naturally, so you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, this viewer seeded way late last fall, dormant seeding. What do they do now?
Well, if it's coming up, then great. Fertilize it with fertilizer without containing any kind of a herbicide, pre-emergent, just a straight, fertilizer. Make a couple applications this spring, get it going before the summer.
All right. What if a viewer who really needs to put down sod cannot get irrigation on it right now?
It's tough if we hope it's hoping to be wet, but you need to irrigate it, and if you can't irrigate it, you just gotta hope that it rains.
Okay,
Yeah.
which is always best anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, you ready, Fred?
I'm ready.
All right, these people had these millipede things that came into their house after the last rain.
They were millipedes, almost certainly. Again, they come in, they invade the house, sticky traps.
Okay. This particular person has little tiny ants in their kitchen already. Why, and what do they do to get rid of those?
Well, so they're coming in and foraging from colonies outside the house. Again, I like to use either the taro bait or one of the little bait stations. Put those out, and you should be able to control them.
Okay, is there a systemic that will manage rose insects without hurting the bees?
Sure, the imidacloprid would work pretty well, and it is labeled for roses and rose pests.
Okay, what is tanglefoot?
Tanglefoot is a sticky material that we use to catch insects, to monitor insects. So it's a very sticky something you can see. It comes in a spray can.
Cool. All right, so lots of cicada killers last year. Should we expect the same thing this year?
Depends what the cicada population is. If the cicada population is up, then we'll have more cicada killers. Remember, let's not forget that this is the year for the brood 4 of the 17-year cicadas. So it'll be coming into the Omaha area.
So here comes the plague. All right, so I get to do the plant of the week because Dennis said he won't. And Gladys has shared her kaffir lily with us. She does this pretty much the first show or early in the season every year when it's in flower. It's a monstrous beautiful thing from South Africa. It's a bulb. There's a latex in it, and it's poisonous. It's not hardy. She says the most important thing to keep a kaffir lily alive is in the winter, you do not water, and she puts hers in the garage. And the only time you ever repot it is when it actually breaks the pot. And then you put it on the east side of the house outside, water it well, and it does these little offsets to produce. So, as always, thanks to Gladys for bringing that, and thanks to whoever carried that in for her. Just beautiful. All right, so we go on to pictures. I believe it is you next, Fred. We have a viewer that has a 15-year-old mulberry tree.
Okay.
And on purpose, maybe, or else in their windbreak. Wow. And they wonder, is this insect damage?
Well, what is this, my night for doomed trees?
Yeah.
That does not look good.
Yeah.
As I do see some definite borer damage. right around the bottom part and curving up. So there was some borer activity. It's hard to tell if it was the primary cause of that injury or was it sort of secondary. I did see a couple of holes in that, so there is some borer injury. What I want to do is go up and take away that bark. Looks like there's some loose bark. Take that away, and so we can see where the living tree is. Again, doesn't look good, at least for that branch. I'm not sure if that was just one branch or so, but again, you could put on a borer spray, something like bifenthrin or permethrin, first week, probably the middle of May, and then another application a couple weeks later would, control the borers that are there. But again, I think that at least that branch is
A former.
doomed.
Okay. All right, Bill, it's too bad Rock's not on tonight because this is his favorite turf.
Yeah.
This viewer wants to know, do you give up on the bluegrass or give up on the zoysia?
Honestly, at this point, I gave up on the bluegrass. I mean, there's a lot of zoysia there, and it's a lot easier to kill that bluegrass now with a glyphosate Roundup application. Kill it out, fertilize the zoysia when it greens up. It will fill in, and if you want the zoysia gone, I mean, then you're going to have to go out and do that in the fall and do aggressive Roundup applications, and then do a fall seeding. But when you're that far along, I think it looks cool because you have the contrast this time of year. But I'm sure you don't, and so you probably want to go out with the Roundup and just give up on the bluegrass and just go with what you got.
All right, thank you, Bill. All right, Amy, this is a viewer in the northwest Omaha area. They have an emerald luster Norway maple.
Okay.
They're noticing open areas on the bark, and their issue is this oozing something? Is it a can? What do we have going on here?
Now, this could be a couple of things. The one thing when we look at this type of trees is they're very prone to freeze cracks, heating and cooling, especially if it's on the south-facing part of the tree. And those freeze cracks can expand to open up the trunk. The other disease that we see very commonly, especially in the Omaha area, is verticillium wilt. And it is a soil-borne fungal disease that impacts the roots. And one year we can see it really bad on the tree, and then the next year we don't. And the symptoms that we see is it affects one side of the crown because it's the side of the crown of the roots that are affected. So we see thinning of the canopy, our chartreuse or yellowing of the leaves because of the lack of water and nutrients being supplied to the tree. Now, is there anything you can do for it? No, there's no fungicides that you can use for the trees. You just kind of live with it. And like I said, some years it's really bad, and then other years it looks like the tree has made a miraculous recovery. And a lot of times that has to do with a lot of nice spring rains and a lot of nice water availability to move those nutrients, even though they're kind of plugged up.
All right, thank you, Amy. Okay, Dennis, two different viewers, two different locations, two different trees, two different squirrels. David City, the squirrel did this on the branches, and I know we have one on campus like this, and the second one is actually the second tree because they've now replaced this tree with another one, and that squirrel has gone back and done the same thing. What the heck?
Okay, there's two different things happening, both by squirrels, but there's two different habits. One is easy to remedy and the other one is almost impossible. This picture shows them when they were stripping to get moisture or micronutrients that are right under the bark, the canyon. Especially when we have a cold winter, sometimes the only place they can get moisture is by stripping that bark and licking and getting some of that moisture out. This one is territorial marking. A male squirrel, usually a male, will come around every morning, do a chip with his incisors, and then rub his chin there. And squirrel graffiti, it's going like, hey, this is my territory, all you other squirrels back off. And they'll do it over and over and over again. Now, repellents usually will not work on the stripping because that's necessary for life, and so repellents won't work then. But the territorial marking, you could use something using vegetable oil and cayenne pepper and paint it on the tree, and you have to do it every so often, about once a week. And so when that squirrel goes there to chip again, he'll burn his lips, and he'll decide to mark something else. They may mark your garage, they may mark your picnic table, they may mark your anything, your deck, but they'll mark anything they can. So.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Well, we've been focusing a lot on soil this season because after all, it is the International Year of Soil. Our next feature shows us the importance of getting a good idea of what makes up your soil by having it tested. Here's Bill to tell us more.
"2015 is the International Year of Soils, and so we're going to dedicate a bunch of segments this year on Backyard Farmer to soils, the thing we grow our plants in. And so spring is a great time to take our soils, take a sample, and submit that sample to a soil testing lab so we can understand the soil physical and chemical properties of that soil, because that's going to affect how we fertilize our plants this coming year. We can do this in our lawn, we can do this onto our beds, raised beds. It's really good to know what the soil nutrient status is of all these different type of planting areas. It's really quite simple to do is take a soil sample. What you need to do is first dig into the soil area you want to test and make sure it's a representative area. You don't want to go to a spot that might be different than the bigger area if it's a lawn or say a bed. And take a bunch of different samples. We'll pool those samples together into a bucket, mix them up thoroughly, and then put it into a plastic bag and send it off to a lab for analysis. In Nebraska, we have a bunch of soil testing labs, so a quick Google search, I'm sure you can find a soil testing lab near you. When sampling your lawn, it's really a good opportunity to look down at the thatch and see, you have much of a thatch problem developing. So what you can do is use a sod knife or even just a garden trowel. So take your knife, dig into that soil, cut a little bit of a plug, and pull that plug up. And look to see if you have much thatch, which is that dead material you can see that's right above the soil but below the green tissue, or where the green tissue would be in the spring. If you start getting more than 3/4 of an inch, you may want to consider doing some type of cultivation to remove that thatch over the course of the spring. Using a soil test is a great way to figuring out what's going on beneath your plants in the soil. And it's really important to make sure you're fertilizing your plants properly. So we encourage you to do it and keep track of those results from year to year and see how effective you are at managing your plants.
It's really as easy as that. Just take a few scoops from those different parts of your landscape and send it in to be analyzed. And then you can use that information to either amend that soil or figure out how you're going to fertilize, as opposed to just generally throwing something out there. All right, Fred, we had 2 or 3 viewers that found these twigs and they think that is scale of some sort. What is that?
No. Those are katydid eggs. Katydid eggs. And what's really cool about it, of course, katydids are those very large green insects that we'll see flying around our landscape. We want to encourage them. They cause no damage to any of our plant material. And of course, they're just a wonderful source of food for wildlife.
Awesome.
So it's a highly desirable one. And yeah, those are katydid eggs. They lay them on twigs up in the trees, and then with all these overlapping sort of oval eggs.
Cool.
So they'll be hatching this spring.
Very cool. So know what it is before you kill it.
Yeah, that's...
Okay, we have a thin, clumpy turf picture. We don't know where this viewer's from either, Bill, but they did aerate and seed last fall, and you can almost see the seed in the plugs, it looks like.
Yeah, Brock and I were talking about this one. We just don't have enough information to know what happened. We don't think it was the aeration. There's annual bluegrass coming into here. So this is something that probably killed by something else and is being blamed on the aerating in the fall, and it's just really unclear what killed the turf at this point.
Okay, so overseed this spring.
Yeah, it's going to be an overseed, and we're getting to that point now. So.
All right. Amy, this is a viewer that's had a jade plant for 20 years. They thought they had insects, but it looks more like it's sort of some water-soaked spots on the foliage and then also on the trunk of the plant. They have been using a systemic insecticide about every 6 or 8 weeks. So,
okay. This is one Kim and I discussed a little bit. There isn't a disease that's affecting the jade plant. Typically, I haven't seen a disease issue with jades. I have seen some toxicity issues with fluoride and chlorine, but these aren't matching either. Probably the thing that we're more concerned about is overwatering. Mm-hmm. If you're doing a drench insecticide every 8 weeks, a jade really only needs to be watered about once every 2 to 3 months. They're a drought-loving plant. So probably to help your jade plant, back off. Mm-hmm. The one systemic insecticide should be able to hold it off. You should be fine. Give it 2-3 months before you give it another water and see how it looks.
Well, and Amy, other than mealybugs, jade just don't have very many insect pests, so you wonder what they're treating for.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, Dennis, something dug these holes, and they want to know what did it and how do they control it? So they shoveled soil back out of these holes.
Yeah, it looks like vole holes because they're open holes. It's not mole, it's not gopher, and it looks too small to be, and it's too much dirt around to be 13-line ground squirrels. So I would go with voles. Okay. Voles opening up their holes after they've been closed or they closed them for the winter.
All right.
And so you may just look down the hole and see a little vole stick up with his little mustache and look straight at your face. So
Excellent.
try that.
Okay, so we have a Twitter question this week, and we are going to put it up on the screen for you. Last year, my pot-grown tomatoes got a bad black leaf blight. What should I do with the soil? Reuse it, compost it, or throw it away? So if you know the answer, you tweet that to us at BYFUNL. Next week, we'll see if we can stump the chump, which would be, in this case, probably pathology. All right, so we have a whole bunch of announcements. Maxwell Arboretum, we started the first Tuesday's walking tours today. Unfortunately, it rained. We have more information for website on that one. Our second fun thing is attracting beneficial insects, predators, parasitoids, and pollinators. Glacier Creek Preserve, Bennington on Saturday the 18th. Our third one is vegetable gardening workshops, April 15th in Grand Island, and the 23rd, a couple numbers on the screen, and those are extension folks on that one. Our fourth one is growing and foraging for mushrooms, including shiitake at Color Middle School, and that would be Monday the 13th at 7 p.m. at the Garden Club. And finally, I believe we have Finke Gardens is doing their classes the 10th, 11th, and 12th and 13th. So it is time for the season. All right, we have time for just a handful of questions. And all right, so Fred, let's do this one. This is a viewer in the Gretna area, has post-harvest pests. Once they pick their tomatoes, they keep them in a fruit bowl in the kitchen. They have gnats. They've used glue traps, but they'd like to get to the root of the issue.
Well, I think if they're harvesting the tomatoes, probably fruit flies. They become incredibly abundant late in the season. Again, using the little sticky cards that you can purchase, will certainly help reduce those. But again, they're coming in and keep the tomatoes sealed up to try to keep them away from them. But, tomatoes are fruit fly magnets, so it's going to be very difficult. Using an aerosol spray, even in the house, you could use something like that.
Or eat them. Not the flies.
Eat the tomatoes.
Not the tomatoes.
Yes.
Okay, so we have two different brome control questions, Bill. One is in Omaha. It's a property on the river. It's an acreage. The brome was actually planted by the previous owner. The second is in Lincoln County, and they have brome in the buffalo grass.
Okay. So the brome is going to be a tough thing to take care of, and it's going to generally come down to a non-selective herbicide to try to keep it under control. There may be some control with tenacity, but on the buffalo grass, I would be a little bit leery with that. And so it's definitely a difficult thing to do, but it's going to require that spot treating with a non-selective herbicide like Roundup.
All right, thank you. Amy, we have just a little bit of time. This is a Geneva viewer with a chartreuse river birch that's also not leafing out.
Okay.
Someone said to use iron. Somebody else said, or actually they put Epsom salts on it. What else should they do?
Usually we're dealing with iron chlorosis if you're getting that chartreuse or yellow coloring of the foliage. It isn't because we have a lack of iron in the soil. It has to deal with pH and the binding of the iron and the plant not able to uptake it. If you really want to know if it's an iron problem, take a liquid iron solution once it leaves out and spray it on the tree. If it is an iron chlorosis with that liquid iron sprayed directly on the leaf, it should green up like that. You should have no problems. Give it about 3-4 weeks and you're going to get that nice little chartreuse yellow coloring all over again.
Excellent.
So that's about the best way to determine if it's iron chlorosis or not.
Thanks. All right, Dennis, since you're on, we have a Wisner viewer that has a garter snake in their basement.
Some people have all the luck.
In a container with water available, and he wants to know when he can turn it outside.
Oh, right now. Yeah, they can go out even when there's a little snow cover. Usually we say mid-March to April. They have merged, so even out there, let it out now. Let it out the sunny part of the day. Be fine.
Okay, and we're going to stick with you since we don't get you very often. This
Okay.
is a Fremont viewer that has a woodpecker pecking on the metal vent.
Okay, that's a male and he's drumming. When they peck on vents or anything metal, it's a male trying to attract females, and of course he gets a better sound, so he's going, well, I'm going to do this, you know. And they usually do it about 5 a.m. because that's the time to attract the females. And so it's hard to stop that. It will stop after the woodpecker or flicker mating season, which will be another maybe 30 days. But if it is a big problem, you can hang what's called a scare eye, predator eye, or evil eye, these balloons that have the right configurations for flickers to keep them away, and kind of just have it float around there. Looks like a beach ball.
Okay, we have one in our neighborhood that does the same thing on the roof of our neighbor's gazebo, and it's, my goodness, that is loud.
Wow.
Yeah.
It attracts you, doesn't it?
Well, you certainly wonder. Yeah, you certainly wonder what's going on with that one. So very interesting to know that that's what they do. They do that on the lights in the tennis courts as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for Backyard Farmer tonight. We want to say thanks to our panel for another great show. Thanks to everybody who submitted questions and pictures. Helping us on the phones tonight, we had Gladys Juring, George Edgar, John Carriato, Susan Strike, and Nebraska Extension Horticulture Assistant Terry James. From Finke Gardens was Luann Finke. Next time on Backyard Farmer, we'll be hearing from our plant pathologist, Lauren Giesler, about how to select a good tree. Lauren will talk about good selections to help avoid some of the diseases we hear so much about on the show. We'll also be hearing about turf management at Hawks Field right here in Lincoln. So good night, good gardening, and we'll see you all next week right here on Backyard Farmer.